There's something most people feel, but rarely stop to question. Why does your mind feel busy, even when you're not doing anything? Not physically busy, not externally overwhelmed, but internally, there's always something running, something unfinished, something pulling at your attention. And even when you sit down to rest, it doesn't feel like rest, it feels like noise. Most people assume that feeling is normal, that it's just part of modern life. Or worse, they assume it's something wrong with them, that they lack focus, that they're easily distracted, that they need more discipline. But that's not what's happening. What you're experiencing isn't just distraction, it's fragmentation. And there's an important difference. Distraction is temporary, it's something that interrupts your attention. Fragmentation is structural. It's what happens when your attention is interrupted so often that it can't stabilize anymore. It's not just that you lose focus, it's that your ability to stay focused begins to erode. And over time, your mind adapts to that environment. It starts to expect interruption, it becomes uncomfortable with stillness, it looks for something to engage with, even when nothing is required. That's why you reach for your phone without thinking, why silence feels uncomfortable, why doing nothing feels difficult. Not because you're incapable of focus, but because your attention has been trained to move. Let's go deeper. Fragmentation doesn't show up in obvious ways. It doesn't feel like a single problem. It feels like a collection of small things. You start tasks, but don't finish them. You switch between ideas without fully developing them. You consume information, but struggle to retain it. And at the end of the day, you feel like you've been busy, but not clear, active, but not effective, engaged, but not satisfied. That's the experience of fragmentation. Because without continuity, your thinking never fully forms. Ideas don't settle, thoughts don't complete, decisions don't resolve. Everything stays slightly open, slightly unfinished. And that creates something most people don't recognize: mental load. Your mind starts holding on to everything: unfinished thoughts, unresolved decisions, incomplete tasks. Even when you're not actively thinking about them, they're still there. And that's why your mind feels busy, even when nothing is happening, because it hasn't had the chance to reset. Now, here's the important part: this isn't random. The environments you interact with every day are designed in a way that fragments attention, not necessarily in a malicious way, but structurally. If a system benefits from your attention, it needs to keep re engaging you. It needs to pull you back in, again and again, through notifications, messages, updates, recommendations, each one small, each one seemingly harmless. But together, they create a constant pattern of interruption. And over time, that pattern becomes your default state. Your mind becomes reactive instead of deliberate, and it moves toward whatever appears next, instead of staying with what matters. And that shift is subtle, but significant, because it changes how you think. Let's talk about that. Deep thinking requires something very simple: time under attention, uninterrupted time, stable focus, continuity. It requires staying with an idea long enough for it to develop. But when your attention is constantly interrupted, that process breaks down. You recognize ideas, but don't explore them. You understand things at a surface level, but not deeply. You feel informed, but not clear. And that distinction matters, because clarity doesn't come from exposure. It comes from engagement, from staying with something long enough to understand it. Without that, thinking becomes shallow. Fragmented attention leads to fragmented thinking, and fragmented thinking leads to poor decisions. Because decisions require structure. They require holding multiple ideas in your mind at once. They require seeing connections. But if your attention keeps shifting, you can't hold those ideas long enough. So decisions become reactive, short term, driven by whatever is in front of you. And over time, that shapes your direction. Not intentionally, but gradually. This is why so many people feel stuck. Not because they're not trying, but because their attention is constantly being divided. So nothing gets the depth it needs. And without depth, there's no real progress. There's another layer to this as well, and it's emotional. When your attention is fragmented, your emotional state becomes unstable. You move quickly between inputs, each one carrying a different tone, something positive and something stressful, something trivial, something urgent. And your mind has to adjust each time, without time to process, without time to settle. So you end up feeling unsettled, without knowing why. A constant low-level tension, a background noise. And again, most people assume that's normal, but it's not neutral. It has an impact on how you think, how you feel, how you act. So what's the shift? It starts with awareness, not trying to force focus, not trying to fix everything at once, just noticing. Noticing where your attention goes without you choosing it. How often you switch tasks, how often you interrupt yourself, how often something pulls you away before you've finished what you started. Because once you see the pattern, you can begin to change it. Not by force, but by creating space. Space for attention to stabilize, space for thinking to develop, space for your mind to reset. You don't need to become more disciplined. You need fewer interruptions. You don't need to do more. You need to divide your attention less. And over time, that changes everything. Because the ability to focus hasn't disappeared. It's just been disrupted. And when you restore the conditions, it comes back, slowly, but consistently. So if your mind feels busy, fragmented, constantly pulled in different directions, that doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It means your attention has been shaped by your environment. And once you understand that, you can start to take control. Because attention isn't just something you have, it's something you direct. And where you direct it determines how you think, how you decide, and ultimately, how you live. So start simple. Start noticing. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And that's where things begin to change.